One of the most challenging things when building a game is to achieve that finely tuned level of play where, with practice and patience, players can not only excel at the task at hand, but also show the game at its finest. And with my recent AI in Games episode on BPM bullets per minute, I was intrigued by the opening hours of play and how the core mechanic of the game both helps and hinders this process from materialising. I'm Tommy Thompson, and in this episode of Smoke and Mirrors, let's talk about how the rhythm shooting mechanic of BPM helps enhance a player's cognitive flow. Now, you might have watched the recent AI in Games episode on BPM, and it's quite unique in that I rarely play a game this close to release, much less before it. Unlike a lot of other gaming YouTube channels, I am not on press and PR lists with publishers, given that in the marketing and PR build-up for a game's release, publishers' marketing strategy isn't interested in sharing how the game is made, but rather what it is and why you should buy it. So it was a unique perspective playing BPM's review build in the build-up to release, given the core element of the game is its biggest hurdle. And watching people become excited and frustrated by it while I had overcome it was a rare situation to find myself in. BPM is a rhythm-based first-person shooter, which takes the music synchronization found in games such as Crypt of the Necrodancer and applies it to a first-person shooter. While movement and aiming is entirely freeform, the main actions of the player, shooting, reloading, dashing, and the use of abilities, are all synchronized to the beat system. Depending on the weapon, the timing between firing and reloading changes, so the small pistol has firing and reloading on the full and half beat, while the larger cannons and rocket launchers have full beat cooldowns. It's a rather marketable and interesting concept, and one which is immediately obvious when you see it for the first time, and certainly one that other developers clearly came to at the same time, given BPM is one of 3 different games in development built around this concept, but it's the first one that's made it to market. But what is interesting is that when you sit down with the game, it has a learning curve that needs to be overcome before you can really enjoy it. Now, the idea of a game with a steep learning curve is far from novel. I mean, I grew up playing games in the late 80s and early 90s, while there wasn't really that much effort to acclimatise players. But what makes BPM and its ilk unique is that it's forcing you to override muscle memory that you've long since established. If you're a regular player of FPS titles, and arguably that's the game's target demographic, then the first thing you have to do is unlearn how to shoot, given you are now a slave to the rhythm. And without a doubt, that's where frustration in some players will manifest. But I would argue that once this is overcome, it's actually easier to maintain your engagement with the game thanks to the very same mechanic that originally inhibited it. At the start of the video, I talked about that finely tuned level of play that allows players to excel. It's tied to the notion of cognitive flow, a principle of cognitive science that expresses how someone achieves heightened levels of engagement with a particular task. It's how top-level players can achieve all sorts of feats that become second nature to them and without over-assessing the situation. But the thing is, in a game, it's actually really hard to get that right, given it's all about the task being clearly defined, the task matching the player's ability, and the feedback of the game being clear to the player. If the challenge of a game is insufficient in the context of the player's ability, they'll get bored. If it's too much, they get anxious and frustrated. But if you can successfully balance it, then that's where real cognitive flow occurs for the player. It's why difficulty curves are so hard to balance in games, given this flow space is going to be different for all players. But interestingly, I think it's easier to keep people in that flow space once you get them there in BPM, and that's because of the music. At first, the adherence to the music can feel like a hindrance, and depending on your own wiring, you can adapt to this in an hour, 3 hours or more. However, once you get going, you can really achieve a heightened level of play because the music is helping keep you in that cognitive flow state. One of the key parts of achieving that flow state is minimizing any and all distractions that would pull you out of it, and the music keeps those distractions minimized. But of course, that is reliant on how well you take to the metal music that's being played. Personally, this is very much my jam, and the tracks in the later worlds, notably Svartalfheim and Helheim, really help you push through to the end of the run, especially as you're approaching that end game with all your increased weapons, skills and unlocks. Well, provided you've had a lucky run, that is. But yeah, it's a really interesting game and it's well worth exploring. And for that, thanks for watching this episode of Smoke and Mirrors. It seemed obvious to me that this episode should be on BPM, because sadly I've been so busy with other work, it's the only game I've actually really played for much of the last couple of weeks, with maybe exception of playing Sea of Thieves with friends. It's been that kind of month. Anywho, if you've been playing BPM, let me know your thoughts, or even if you're just interested in it as well. It's an interesting game that could have a long life if it achieves some level of success, and it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. So as we wrap up, let's turn up the music. and get back into that cognitive flow zone. Catch you later.